that we're focusing on this year is setting up a proper adaptation work program for New Zealand. Because the argument in New Zealand has been about mitigation, reducing our emissions. That's kind of been the focus of the debate and most of the work program for a long, long time. And of course we need to do that, because so far we haven't actually started to bring down emissions. So we've got to keep doing that. But also because we are experiencing fires in the Port Hills, which look more like a Sydney brush fire than anything we've seen in New Zealand before, or flooding that, again, we're more akin to seeing in, say, the Philippines than here in New Zealand more frequently. Incredibly long droughts of deeper intensity that are just wiping out farmers' hopes all over the country. And these increasingly severe and frequent storms that are causing millions of dollars of damage to infrastructure and roads and houses and so on all over the place. That because we are doing this, we actually need to say, okay, this is happening to us and we need to get ahead of this. Because it is apparent that we are not prepared. We haven't thought it through. In December, I released a report snappily titled the Climate Change Adaptation Technical Working Group Stocktake Report. Climate Change Adaptation Technical Working Group, or CATWAG for short. So we released the stocktake, and the stocktake is simply an assessment of what is at risk in the country, and it's a lot. 5 airports, several hundred kilometres worth of roads, rail lines, such as we've still got rail lines, something like 50,000 houses around the country. There's a lot that's at risk, and we haven't really mapped that out before. And then the next report comes out in April, which is what are the options? So what do we do about that? And I know that here in Dunedin, you've had some recent experience with starting to think through, what are the actual practical implications of this? What sort of infrastructure do we have that's below the ground? So, the pipes and so on that we've got. And in most of New Zealand, we've not paid a lot of attention to that for the last 30 years, and we're discovering that having not paid a great deal of attention to it, a lot of it isn't in great shape. But again, there's an opportunity, I think, which is having something of an infrastructure deficit, having not invested in maintaining our pipes in virtually everywhere in the country. Knowing what we now know about climate change, knowing that having a really effective 3 waters system relies on the sea level being basically where it is today, that if we had upgraded it, we would have spent a lot of money on fixing something that we would now need to be rebuilding again to deal with the fact that the water table is changing and all of that engineering gets to change. So we've actually got an opportunity here to say, oh, okay, now that we know what the likely effects are, how do we build out or rebuild that infrastructure in ways that is more resilient to the future? So that's a pretty significant piece of work. And one of the things that we've got to do around that is work out how we work together to do that more effectively than we have in the past. Because New Zealand has, we've got local authorities, we've got regional councils, we've got central government, you've got community groups, you've got a university here. We've got a lot of different bits of the jigsaw puzzle, but we're not awesome at working together in this country, right? In fact, in many parts, I don't think we're actually spectacularly bad at it, but that is one of the things that I really want us, I think, in our government to bring together and to say, actually, we know that we've got to solve this problem. What are some really good processes and systems that we can use for working through this and having community-led adaptation plans that kind of stretch out and take account of what we now know and that protect people's livelihoods and get ahead of this problem before it turns into a real challenge. And I think, again, me being Pollyanna-ish, because you've had some kind of almost some early warning signals here, that actually there's an opportunity here, and because you've got amazing resources here, to be able to kind of get ahead of that there's a contribution that I think Dunedin and Otago can make to the rest of the country in thinking this through about how do we do this? How do we do this together? How do we put in plan, a strategy that's going to work for the next 30 years that brings all of this together? I think if you can work out how to do that here, then that is going to be tremendously helpful to other parts of the country that are kind of facing similar challenges, which, frankly, is everywhere, by the way. Don't let anyone tell you that just because they don't have a seashore anywhere near them, that climate change isn't going to affect them. I know sea level rise has had a bit of publicity recently, but, you know, I was just reading before I came down here that the Southern Alps have no snow, like none, first time. And that there are consequences to that too. You get increased rock falls and, you know, so there are implications everywhere. So that's kind of what we've got in mind, and from a central government perspective, and I hope that, you know, we have the opportunity to work with you. And I do think that central government has a role here in helping to facilitate. I think that there are some functions that we might be able to take on that we haven't taken on in the past. Some of the science I think we could do centrally rather than asking 70 different local authorities all over the country to try and do the same thing with very little resources. There are things that we can provide as resources, but we are really only at the start of thinking all of that stuff through. And I am interested in hearing from you what that looks like and what you could do with it. I want to sort of close first of all by acknowledging Sir Alan Mark and all of the leadership that you have shown over decades and decades and decades and decades, and thank you. And also to acknowledge I'm so used to calling everyone first names, I'm still getting used to it. Claire Curran, a fellow minister who has helped to sort of galvanise some of the action around here and made sure that I came down here as well. So Claire, thank you for your work in this, and also His Worship David Cole. David's a really strong advocate for stronger and more effective action on climate change from central government, working with local government. And working with Local Government New Zealand, the organisation that Dave is now the chair of. And I just want to acknowledge the work that Local Government New Zealand has done, because I think it has become one of the most effective voices in the country, sounding the alarm that actually we've got to start getting ahead of this, pointing out that actually we under-resource our local authorities in New Zealand relative to other countries in the world, and that saying actually you're on your own when it comes to dealing with climate change is kind of a bit of a raw deal. And so I know that our ministers and relevant portfolios are really kind of focused, our minds are focused on probably some quite big calls that we've got